Hi, good morning to all, and thanks for joining us today for the EuroCommerce Policy Talk on the revision of the EU's Waste Framework Directive as it applies to the textile sector. I'm Mr Jeudy-Hugo, the Deputy Director for Global Public Policy at Inditex. Our company is a member of EuroCommerce, and we chair its Sustainable Textiles and Apparel Retailers and Wholesalers Interest Group. STAR is a new group created by EuroCommerce to respond to the EU's policy agenda on textiles. It brings together a key pillar of the textile value chain, the distribution sector, and provides a platform to share industry expertise and best practices with EU regulators while driving policy that supports sustainability, competitiveness, and innovation. The WFD revision is an important component of the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. A fit-for-purpose WFD can also support the achievement of objectives laid out in the EU strategy for sustainable textiles. It will accelerate the development of separate collection, sorting, reuse, and recycling capabilities for textiles, while introducing mandatory and harmonized EPR schemes in EU member states. The STAR Group is actively engaging with EU decision makers on the European Commission's proposal. We support an ambitious regulatory framework that drives innovation and achieves the maximum level of harmonization across a single market. And who better to speak to us today than Aurel Ciobanu-Dordea, Director for the Circular Economy in the Commission's DG Environment. Aurel is at the heart of many legislative initiatives that impact upon our sector, including the WFD revision. And we are so happy to have him here with us today. By way of a brief bio, Aurel joined the Commission in 2009 after serving in the Romanian government and playing a leading role in negotiating Romania's accession to the EU. He has served as Director in DG Justice for Fundamental Rights and Equality, and then as Director in DG Environment for Enforcement and Cohesion. He took up his current duties in May 2022, and our industry has had the pleasure of interacting with him since. Aurel, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me, Chad and colleagues from the STAR group of EuroCommerce. It's a pleasure to engage with you again. And I hope that the sound will work well, because I could hear you with very strong distortions. I hope that you get my voice in good conditions.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, and I hope that the listeners also are not hearing me distorted. Apologies for that. Aurel, I'd like to begin, please, by giving you the floor to provide some introductory remarks on the WFD revision from your perspective. So please take it away.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, I won't expand too much on this, because I think by now this legislative proposal, which was presented by the European Commission before the summer break this year, is known to a large extent to your constituency. But in a nutshell, we wanted to facilitate the implementation of the obligation of separate collection of textiles, which enters into operation, should enter into operation on the 1st of January 2025. And based on the experience we had, for instance, with the functioning of extended producer responsibility schemes in other areas in respect of other products and material and waste streams, we wanted to set out better conditions for the functioning of EPR schemes in the area of the textiles and the management of textile waste. So this is the primary purpose of this legislative proposal, and introducing new rules on textile waste management as well. Why is this focus on textiles? And I'm aware that some of the people in the audience have been questioning already made or announced by the European Commission in this area, because the textile industry accounts on average for the fourth highest negative impact on the environment and on climate change, and the third highest on water and land use from a global life cycle perspective. And we generate in Europe 12.6 million tons of textile waste every year. Moreover, we export a lot of the textiles that we are no longer using outside the European Union, sometimes disguised as textiles for reuse. And this is a loss of material for the Europeans and for the European industry in general, and it also reverberates negatively on the reputation of the European Union has in third countries, where many of these textiles are not really reused, but end on riverbanks and in many unsuitable places, in particular in Africa, but also in Asia. So we have heard from our member states the need to intervene also in this direction by introducing stronger rules on textile waste management and by setting out stronger conditions for extended producer responsibility schemes, as also a modality to reduce the unnecessary or unwarranted exports of textile waste outside the European Union. So we have come up with this legislative proposal, which, to be frank with you, we don't expect maybe necessarily to be finalized under the mandate of the current European Parliament. As you know, there are elections for the European Parliament in June next year. So practically, different legislative procedures need to be concluded before March next year, before the Parliament breaks for the election recess. So it is probable that the Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union, which takes over as of the 1st of January 2024, will prioritize this file, but the chances are not significant that we conclude the legislative procedure before the parliamentary recess. However, we have noticed that there is a strong desire from the member states to have this adopted, and we count on the support also from the European Parliament, also from the future European Parliament, and we are optimistic that somewhere by the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025, we will have these new rules adopted in time before the obligation, or at the same time with the entry into operation of the obligation of separate collection. I would say a word about the fact that this is a directive still, so it will require transposition by the member states, but we are confident that with the degree of detail that we have put in the provisions of these amendments to the Waste Framework Directive, the scope for regulatory divergences between the member states when transposing this directive will be more limited. I would say a word also about the general regulatory context in which this is supposed to operate, and I will make reference to the fact that we just had the agreement between the European Parliament and the Council on a new waste shipment regulation, which is meant to facilitate shipments of waste, including of textile waste, for instance, between the member states of the European Union. And of course, this needs to be seen in the context of other regulatory interventions, which will be important, for instance, for the proper functioning of the EPR scheme, such as the delegated act on textiles to be adopted under the Eco Design for Sustainable Product regulation. for which the political agreement between the Parliament and the Council just happened this week. So the regulation will soon be finalized and will enter into force, allowing us to work as a matter of priority on this delegated act, which is expected to be among the first ones under this regulation. So I will stop here and happy to engage with you on different topics, Chad.
Great, thank you so much, Aurel. Listen, it's very important to hear your views in terms of the important work that you have done with your teams in getting out the European Commission's proposal on the WFD. We thank you for that. We thank you as well for touching on, apart from many other different important points when it comes to waste framework, the piece that you talked about when it comes to harmonization. And we'll get to that point a little bit later on. Before maybe moving into briefly outlining what the STAR Group's position on the WFD revision is, I'd also like to say that naturally you can count on cooperation from all stakeholders, including industry and including the STAR Group in moving forward. As you were saying, that there will need to be some cooperation in the Parliament and the Council if we wish to see this proposal finalized before the EP breaks for elections. And naturally, you can count on our support. I should say that I understand we have roughly about 240 people who are registered for this event. So I'm sure all 240 would love to be there supporting the co-legislators in this work. Now, to move very quickly to give a summary of the STAR Group's position on WFD, and I'd like to get your views on this, Aurel, and also we have some questions that naturally we would like to ask you, as well as questions from the audience. I will summarize what that position is. I will say as well that as mentioned before, we have been very active on this proposal. It's critically important for us. I would invite all listeners to go to the Commission's Have Your Say website to see the STAR Group's feedback on the proposal. It's there, and we believe and we hope that it is useful in terms of informing engagements moving forward. A bit of context is important, I believe, off the bat. So textile retailers and wholesalers experience considerable differences in navigating national waste management systems for textiles across member states. As many member states have or are developing EPR schemes to fulfill the 2025 separate collection obligation for textile waste, the STAR Group calls on European co-legislators to ensure maximum harmonization at EU level to promote common circularity principles and to avoid single market distortions. From STAR's perspective, an EU-wide EPR framework for textiles should include, inter alia, a set of common principles, a clear definition of scope and responsibilities of all stakeholders concerned, a clear fee structure, harmonized reporting, and eco-modulation requirements, proportional financing, and a robust mechanism for monitoring, control, and surveillance. We welcome that the Commission's proposal includes several of these elements, and naturally more elements as well that will lead to harmonization. However, we would like to see co-legislators go further to ensure a robust and enabling EU framework. And just to summarize very quickly for you, Aurel, some of our main policy asks. We would like to see the insurance of a level playing field on EPR obligations, harmonized eco-modulation of fees across member states, a single EU register for producers or a one-stop shop type register that would replace and be more efficient, we believe, than 27 different registers, targeted EPR fees that ensure the circularity of textile products in a cost-efficient way, and lastly, regulatory and policy coherence with other EU legislation and enforcement measures is a must. So, quick summary, a lot there to digest. And with that, maybe Aurel, I'd invite you to comment on that, but what I might do as well, just to start off, is to put to you the first question that we have for the day. So Aurel, we'd be very grateful for your views on the challenges and opportunities in moving purposefully towards a circular textile sector. So how do you believe the WFD will help to attain this? And what further regulatory measures do you believe are necessary that go beyond the Commission's current proposal?
Yeah, thank you, Chad, and allow me to comment first on two remarks that you've made. You practically, when restating the position of EuroCommerce and of the Star Group, as you call yourself, you basically called for regulation, a regulatory intervention under the form of regulation. As I just said, this is, however, we had to take into account the fact that we need to work on the basis of the Waste Framework Directive. It's an intervention in the context of the Waste Framework Directive, but we tried with the proposal to be as detailed as possible. It's not completely unusual for certain directives in certain areas to do so, and we hope that this will secure a strong convergence when the member states will transpose this. I think it will be important for the Commission also to work with the member states during the period of the transposition. Sometimes it does not, we don't have the time to do so, but in this particular case, as we did in other instances, nevertheless, we need to work with them. The second point I would like to make is I heard your message that you are interested to work, to stay engaged with European Commission, and we share this interest. We want to stay engaged with the industry, and because there will be implementing measures that may need to be adopted after the adoption of the legislative proposal, and also interventions, as I mentioned, under the regulation on eco-design for sustainable products. We want to craft these in cooperation with the industry, also with the environmental and non-governmental organizations, and with all the relevant stakeholders in this area. We don't have a set of ideas or preconceived ideas. We have a number of objectives, of course, we aim at, but we want to work these rules with you. Now, you have asked a question about the challenges and opportunities. I mean, of course, there are a number of challenges which flow sometimes from the nature of the sector. The need for a transition to a circular economy in a complex supply chain like the one of the textile industry is maybe stronger than in other areas, and we need to factor this in when we plan for our regulatory interventions. A challenge is also to have a comprehensive view, a life cycle approach when we think about our regulatory interventions. We, in some areas, like packaging, for instance, or automotive or batteries, we have managed to bring forward regulations which enshrine this life cycle approach. Because of the complexity of rules which are relevant for the textile industry, we did not come forward with a regulation which takes a life cycle approach, but we try with the different more punctual interventions which are announced by the strategy on textiles to be complementary and to align all these measures into a comprehensive approach. And we are dealing with the waste dimension now because we are pressed by this deadline on the 1st of January 2025, but we will come with complementary measures, as I indicated, under the eco-design for sustainable products in order to address the design phase or to provide for digital product passport rules applicable for textiles. And we have brought in also a legislative proposal I forgot to mention initially, which is related to something which occurs often in the area of, in the sector of textiles, green claims. So in order to guide the consumers, we brought forward a proposal for a green claims directive, which will be particularly relevant here. There will be a modification announced for 2024-2025. Probably it's more fair to say that it will happen in 2025 in all likelihood. Modification of the textile labeling regulation. So it will be of paramount importance that all these initiatives, it's a challenge to keep them aligned. Another challenge which we need to address will be the current lack of infrastructure, for instance, for sorting and recycling, needed to face the expected additional amounts of textiles collected by member states as from the 1st of January 2025. Such infrastructure exists in some member states which are more advanced and more experienced in terms of handling and sorting this type of waste, but not everywhere. And we will need to see how we can work with the member states in order to support this, also to see how much support we can bring for instance, from structural funds of the European Union, or from loans from the European Investment Bank. We are currently discussing with the European Investment Bank, and we hope that by the middle of 2024 to have a single vision about the priorities for investments in the area of circular economy, and certainly the textile sector will be among these priorities for investment, so that the Commission in the next multi-annual financial framework and the European Investment Bank in its lending policies go in the same direction and support the same priorities for advancing circular economy in practice. And of course, another challenge is represented by the costs of disposal and the environmental externalities linked to the management of waste clothing and household textiles. But we hope that there will be a lot of opportunities. There will be costs which will be incurred by the setting up of the EPR schemes, costs which will be paid by the manufacturers and the producers of textiles. But we believe that these investments will pay off even in a relatively short amount of years, because there will be better secondary materials available to the industry in order to provide recycled content, and it will lead to also certain changes in the manufacturing process, a certain simplification of the textiles which are placed on the market. So I would stop here.
Great, thank you so much, Aurel. That was very interesting in terms of those challenges, potential opportunities as well. As we do transition, there is the opportunity that Europe can help lead from the front and hopefully set the standards that will apply to the circular textiles of the future. I think it was very interesting as well to hear your points on fees. How do we scale up? You were mentioning notably on infrastructure, so collection, sorting, and recycling infrastructure, which we recognize is something that EPR fees may play a role in, as well as other funding mechanisms. You noted the EIB funding, structural funds. I would maybe put on the table as well some of the recovery funds coming out of COVID that have largely gone to energy projects. But as we transition to a circular economy for textiles as well as other products, there's that infrastructure component that is necessary. Can we go and get some of that recovery funding to help to build the circular economy that we need? So thanks very much for that. I had a second question as well, unless you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on, and you made a very valid point actually about the fact that the textile industry moving in the direction of an enhanced sustainability of its value chains and of the products that it places on the market will have the advantage of the first mover. And because of the nature and the volume of consumption of textiles in Europe, we are a leading market for the entire globe. And we are setting standards for the entire globe. So there will be an effort of compliance, a sustained effort to move towards more sustainability, but it will pay off because the European industry will set the standards and will take some advantage from this on the global markets.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
I'm ready for your second question.
Okay, good. Brace yourself. It's not a difficult one. We were talking about the financing, and naturally, when it comes to the WFD revision and textiles, we're looking at the EPR schemes as well as the EPR fees. So, given that these EPR fees can act as an incentive to more sustainable textile design, which is commonly understood, as well as having the potential to drive our sector's transition towards a more resilient, competitive, and sustainable future. What are your perspectives on how these EPR fees should be used and what should they finance to move us forward? You talked a little bit about where we need financing in the future, but how can the EPR fees play a role in this? Maybe just, if I may, to add to that, the Commission is obviously hopefully considering other mechanisms to finance the transition. You mentioned some of them on the table. Do you reckon that any of these would need legislation in the forthcoming mandates? Or do you believe that as we move forward with WFD and the EPR fees and the schemes that are set up, as well as some of those financing mechanisms and initiatives that you put on the table, do you believe that that might be enough, at least for now, to consider the financing of this circular transition?
I think in principle, I hope I got right all your questions, Chad. There were some sound distortions again, but in principle, I got your drift. The EPR schemes are meant to fund the building of the system in itself, and the legislative proposal indicates how, in broad terms, broad brush terms, what are the priorities for funding? That prevention and reuse should be funded, also research and innovation should be funded, the infrastructure should be funded. Now, whether this is a sufficient set of rules and elements and criteria for the specification of the value of the EPR schemes, we believe not, and we believe that the sustainability criteria that we will bring forward through the delegated act under the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product regulation will be instrumental in order to help the member states define the specific EPR fees, each in their own jurisdiction. I heard your call about the need or your call for a uniform level of EPR fees applicable across the European Union. I'm afraid that this might not be possible, also because of the mere fact that the economic realities in the different member states are different, and the level of prosperity and incomes of the consumer citizens are different. So naturally, in a member state like Latvia, for instance, or Romania, if the EPR fees would be identical with those to be developed and applied in France or in Belgium, might not be sustainable, will have an impact on the prices and on the operation of the system, which will be detrimental. So I think it is realistic to expect that different levels will be set in different member states. However, what we want to make sure is that these levels are taken into account the same elements and are based on the same criteria and go in the development of the system which while the EPR schemes will be national, are compatible and comparable with each other.
Yes, thank you, Aurel. I think that makes a lot of sense and is certainly something close to our position from the STAR group in terms of what we would like to see, that maximum level of harmonization. Certainly, as you said, if the fees are calibrated to different member state realities, just to make sure that we are dealing with, we're comparing apples to apples, so to speak, and that the scope and the objectives and the definitions are harmonized to the greatest possible degree. I wanted to pick up on another question, and they are coming fast and furious now in the chat from the audience. There's a lot of interest, obviously, in getting questions to you. You mentioned before briefly secondary raw material markets. This is something that we are looking at. And we all know that there's a dearth in terms of those secondary raw materials that we are needing and looking for in terms of recycling and moving towards new fibers, etc. Is this something, naturally, this is something that the Commission is looking at, has on its radar. Is there anything that you can say in terms of enabling legislation that we have or that we could potentially have in the future, and not putting you on the spot here naturally, where there would be an enabling framework to help to support those secondary raw material markets? Do you think the WFD is that step in that direction, or do you believe that anything else is necessary? Thanks.
We believe that for the moment, thank you very much for your question, which is a very challenging one. As we move, or we try to move towards a more circular economy, it is clear that circularity involves, among many other aspects, the need to recycle and to incorporate recycled content in the new products which are manufactured. This is an economic need, I would say, because it leads to a reduction of the consumption of the natural resources. And I would say that, given that one of the overarching political priorities of our societies are the decarbonization of our economies and societies, it contributes recycling and incorporating mandatory recycled content in new products contributes also to the decarbonization of our economies. And of course, when you speak about recycling and mandatory recycled content, you think about secondary raw material markets. For the moment, we see these developing on a number of products, on which I will not mention here, but plastics comes to the fore as one candidate. I would say in relation to batteries, we will see this developing in the next few years very strongly. There is something already in Nuce, incipient here. We are having similar reflections when we speak about critical raw materials. It's not directly relevant for textiles because textiles do not incorporate usually critical raw materials, but we can learn lessons from the experience that we will be building now with the secondary markets for critical materials, which are very important. So by mandating in the future, possibly under the Eco Design for Sustainable Product regulation, the incorporation of recycled content into textiles, this will be an important push factor for the formation of a market of secondary materials, or the maturation of the market of secondary materials for textiles as well. And I believe that the proper functioning of the national extended producer responsibility schemes, the proper functioning of PRO organizations will be other indispensable ingredients for the proper functioning of such a market. So more interventions going in this direction are to be expected again under the regulation on eco-design for sustainable products.
Excellent, thank you. And I believe a congratulations is in order because we understand that there was a political agreement reached between the Council and the Parliament on the SPR earlier this week at a very, very early hour, apparently, if we trust the Brussels press. So that's something that we're looking forward to working and supporting the work via trade associations and others that will sit in the eco-design forum and those that will be active on the delegated act, which will set the scene for many of the topics that we're talking about today. Aurel, I have a question now from the audience. So I'm going to start taking questions from the chats that are coming up. And the first one I'll take is from Decathlon. Decathlon naturally are our vice chairs of the STAR groups. I'm very happy to be able to put this to you. Decathlon is asking, in preparation for the trialogue and considering the renewed context of the European Commission, what is your level of confidence regarding the implementation of this legislation? So the preparations for the trialogues on WFD, which you mentioned, there will be a push necessarily under the Belgian presidency to try to arrive at a general approach in the Council, as well as a first reading agreements in the Parliament, which would then allow for trialogues to take place. So as we anticipate those, and there's still quite a bit of work to do before we get to trialogues, but when we do get to trialogues, and recognizing that we will have a new European Commission probably by November this year, what is your level of confidence regarding the direction of travel of this revision and the implementation of it afterwards? Thank you.
Is a question about whether the renewal of the political cycle at the European level will impact negatively on the direction of travel of this legislative proposal. If this is a question, we believe that it is fairly safe to say that there will be no negative impact on the direction of travel. We have seen interest. I mean, first of all, this proposal addresses some real needs, and we are happy to work with the industry to make it even more realistic, even more adapted to the needs if this is necessary. We are ready to work with the member states and with the European Parliament also to adapt it further if it's necessary. So the problem is real. And we believe that the solution is fairly realistic. We try to do the maximum of what is possible in the context given, for instance, operating with a directive. We see support from the member states. We have seen support from the European Parliament. There are no major there is no major questioning of this legislative proposal, so we don't have reasons to be skeptical or pessimistic about the direction of travel. Now, because I thought I understood from the written question circulated by Decathlon that there was something also about the implementation. Now, implementation is an important part of the discussion. And as I mentioned, we will need to work together with our member states in order to make sure that there is a shared understanding of a number of underlying assumptions behind this legislative proposal. Of course, the discussion in the Council already will clarify a lot of problems. But when you speak about the transposition of the directive, further common vision developed among the member states and with the Commission and common understanding will be necessary in order to make sure that, I mean, we don't want trouble. We don't want infringement procedures after the transposition is over. We want the system to function properly and to get there as soon as possible. And only by working together is this possible, and we are ready to put the energy and the steer necessary into this. But implementation is even more than this. And here we need to say that based on the experience we have accumulated under the Waste Framework Directive, under the Landfill Directive, and under the Packaging Directive, it's true in respect of other waste streams, we see that the implementation in practice is lagging behind. So we will need to stay engaged with the member states in order to make sure that also the development on the ground, and not only their regulatory interventions when transposing this legislative proposal, but the development on the ground, the infrastructure, l'intendance doit suivre l'infanterie. The development on the ground must match the regulatory ambitions and requirements. Things
Excellent.
must happen.
No, definitely. And I enjoyed your the comment there. I wonder if you've seen the new Napoleon movie. I'm hearing mixed reviews.
No, not yet, but I am. I'm reading the press about this, and in preparation of my watching the movie in a cinema.
Excellent. Listen, we have I think that is a very useful information to have, comments to take on board. It's naturally something that we're very we take at heart in terms of when we do talk about the implementation and the transposition of the WFD, when it comes to make sure that naturally, as our principal approach, probably our most important policy ask is around harmonization. That's something that we're looking to the long term, but there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done before we get to that stage. Aurel, I have another question from the chat. This is coming from Independent Retail Europe. And they're asking, could you foresee an exemption from the EPR for retailers with a very limited sales area or a very limited offer of textiles?
We need to think about this. This is my answer at this stage. I am not in a position, and I don't have the power to sell, letters of forgiveness and exemptions. But we need to institutionally, so as an institution, we need to reflect on this and to see how feasible and compatible and undisruptive for the attainment of the general objectives of the proposal would that be. So it's certainly a suggestion that we note down for reflection and for taking a position.
That's great. Thank you. Another question from the chat, and this is coming from Fezi in Brussels. So Fezi's asking, it was mentioned that the Commission is confident that the degree of details in the directive, the current proposal, will limit regulatory differences between member states. How will this concretely look like, considering there are major differences between member states on product scope and the objective of the EPR schemes? And here there's a number of examples that have been provided: France, Italy, Sweden, the Netherlands, etc. There are others that are either have EPR schemes in place with pros, some that are voluntary, some that are thinking of doing it. So in terms of Fezi's question, we're wondering what your comments would be on that. Thank you.
Yeah, my comment would be the following. We are reasonably confident that we are offering a good basis for a discussion with the member states, a realistic discussion and sincere discussion that we need to have in the Council about the convergence of these rules. So we will fight for this convergence, and I believe that those member states who are having these regulatory divergences already in operation, but who are also the home of big brands which sell across the continent and beyond the remit of this political continent, which is European Union, have an interest and understand, those member states, the need for regulatory convergence as well, because it will be in the interest of the flagship companies that they host on their territory. So we will bank on this, and we will try to have a fruitful conclusion of these frank discussions in the Council. And this is also the sense of us remaining engaged with the member states after the adoption of this directive in order to make sure that we have this convergence of understanding remains when in the phase when the member states need to adopt the legislation transposing this directive.
That's perfect, Aurel. Nous allons être à votre côté when it comes to
Looks
pushing.
perfect now. We will see. It looks perfect now. We will see when we will draw the line in 2-3 years.
Indeed, indeed. A further question from UNEP, the UN Environmental Programme. As a part of the textile waste is exported, how will the EU manage textile waste trade with other countries outside of the EU? And I think that this also relates to what you were mentioning before in terms of the waste shipment regulation.
Yeah, I mean, I will be relatively brief, but I would like also to convey the message that we are committed to drastically diminish the disguised export of textile waste under the form of reusable textiles that currently happen from the European Union towards third countries, in particular in the countries under development. This is a real problem. There is political awareness, not only within the European Commission, but within our member states, within the big exporters of such waste, political awareness about the dimension, the size of this problem, and that we need to come to a grip on it and to reduce drastically this. And we hope that the consequence of the combined rules which we bring forward through this amendment of the Waste Framework Directive and the rules which we have already adopted, new rules on waste shipments, will represent this barrier that we bleed less waste towards third countries.
That's great. And I think that there is that tie-in naturally that we're all aware of in the Commission's proposal. I think it's Article 22D, if my memory serves correctly, where the Commission is obviously discussing.
Your memory is better than mine.
Well, I hope it's right. There might be some comments in the chat if it's not, but there
I'll check on you.
Thanks. You can hold me to that. We have a question here from Zalando, and I will just do a time check. We have roughly about 10 minutes left. And again, so appreciative of your time today, Aurel. The question from Zalando in the chat says, how do you see industry take-back schemes within the context of WFD? Some member states at the moment forbid them, which we could argue goes against circular principles and closing the loop. Did you have any comments on that?
My comments are that this is a topic I would note down for reflection. I frankly, my knowledge is limited. I'm not an expert in this area, but maybe my colleagues are more aware. Certainly, they are more aware than me whether this is already addressed by the proposal. But I will note the issue of the take-back schemes down for verification, and it should be, if we are not addressing already this matter, it should be also a matter of reflection as the earlier question.
That's perfect. Thank you. Maybe some more high-level 20,000-foot view questions. Again, really quite keen to get your views on some of these topics. And I'm going to paraphrase a question that we have from Decathlon, again, our vice chairs of the STAR group. We have the IPCs. You mentioned before when we were talking about secondary raw material markets, the batteries. The Battery Alliance is well known, and there are 7, I believe, IPCs, or at least 7 sectors where we are purposefully moving ahead in the EU with strategic industry initiatives to help build up the industry in the context of open strategic autonomy and to reduce dependencies on maybe third countries. do you foresee, Aurel, and again, this is a blue sky question. Do you foresee textiles being um, fulfilling potentially criteria down the road for being considered a strategic industry, given what you said at the beginning, that, and we are working purposefully to address the environmental externalities of our sector, and given that we have come a long way, and yet we still have a long way to go, do you believe that we might be able to be considered one of these strategic industries? And the underlying assumption here is that if that were the case, we could start to build out concrete industrial plans for the scale up of, let's say, fiber to fiber recycling or the next fibers and textiles of the future. We know that that's in DG Grow's remit, but naturally you play such an important role working with them on these subjects.
Yeah, we work hand in hand with our brothers and sisters from DG Grow. And we share, naturally, the political objectives that they serve as well. And while your question suggests also a sort of association with the critical raw material approach, I don't think that this is the case, but you've also put it more directly. Should the textile industry be considered a strategic industry? And I think that the answer is an unconditional yes. I mean, and I've heard this from many industry associations and from many companies, a desire to put this also in the context of the drive for the reindustrialization of Europe. We have lost so many jobs over the past several decades in the textile manufacturing sector in particular, and maybe we will be able, by working in this direction that we are discussing today about, to repatriate some of these jobs. Labor costs indeed contribute a lot to competitiveness, and are a consideration which was significant when externalizing number of manufacturing activities. And I am not now in a position to comment about the labor costs, but if we can do something to support the strategic role for the textile industry, we will not hesitate to do it in this. And we believe that banking on the competitive edge of the European textile industry, which is sustainability, we are the most advanced of all the continents on this. I think this will help the European manufacturers. If we become even better in this respect, it will be to the advantage of the European manufacturers, European brands, and of the European consumers as well.
Exactly. And I think that we fully support that. Couldn't agree more on that point. I think in the interests of time, maybe a last question, and also a question for you, because you've been, again, so kind with your time in terms of answering some of our key questions around this proposal, but we'd also like to hear from you. And we'd like to hear as well how we can engage, and when I say we, the STAR group as well as stakeholders in the audience, how best can we engage with you moving forward? Because I initially had a question around what are the best ways to support the work that's being done at the moment, recognizing full well that the European Commission has put its proposal on the table. It is being discussed by the co-legislators. You will come back again at the end point, let's say, when we have the trilogue negotiations. But in what ways would you like to see stakeholders and industry notably engage with the Commission on the WFD, on some of the issues that are associated with it, and some of the concerns, the challenges, and the opportunities that have been raised by industry in the context of this proposal? So open floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to say I haven't been kind with my time. It's also my duty, and I am trying to address your concerns the best I can. I'm not sure I can provide you with all the details, and we have not yet complete plans with our plans are not yet complete with all the details that you would expect, but we can certainly discuss with you about these details, and we are coming to the point of engagement. I think it would be useful that regularly in the next period, I don't know, maybe once a month, that we touch base and we have a discussion here, also with my team, which is a very small one, and which is dealing with this, in order to see how things advance and what are the challenges, and how we can work together. We may not see eye to eye on all matters, but at least we will understand better each other's positions. And I still believe that on most issues we see eye to eye with you.
That's great, Aurel. Listen, thank you again for your time, and thank you for everybody in the audience who's been listening today. It was a pleasure to have you here. We hope that today's discussion engendered some reflection, some further questions that you may have. Now, naturally, if you have any questions on the STAR Group's activities, please get in contact with EuroCommerce. And I will not invite people to contact you for additional questions, Aurel. I'm sure that they will. I don't necessarily need to invite that. I wouldn't want to flood your inbox or your voicemail with questions after this event. But again, it has been a pleasure, again, as always, to see you here today. I wish you a great rest of the day, and maybe we can catch up on our movie critiques at some point soon.
Definitely in January, and thank you very much for the invitation and for the time you devoted as well to this discussion. So I wish you a very good day. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.